This is Let's Talk Best Intentions, all things wealthy, healthy, happy.
Oh, do you think that's a bit cheesy?
Yeah, but I quite like it. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Best Intentions. We are still doing it remotely, but we kind of expect that to continue for a little bit longer. And yeah, I think we've probably had very similar weeks to what we had last week. So probably not much of an update there. I don't know, Mel, have you got much of an update?
I've had a lot of conversations where people go, how was your weekend? And everyone goes, it was fine. The big thing I did yesterday is I painted my toenails. So I had a bit of a pamper session and it was actually really delightful, and I would really recommend it because I'm so rarely kind of putting on makeup and making myself look nice and feel nice. So doing that every now and then I would definitely recommend.
I do put makeup on for this, and it is quite nice. I don't really wear makeup very much generally, but to have one day where you make yourself look nice feels quite good. But yesterday I had a pretty big day yesterday. I put jeans on for the first time in about 2 weeks. Every other day has been trackies and leggings, and that felt like a good moment. I was making a real effort, but I'm back to the leggings again.
Yes, leggings are key. Trackies.
Yeah, but the what was quite good this week was that we had that great question from Vix.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was that was great. And the question was, if anyone missed that, is now a good time to start investing? And I gave a little bit of a short answer to that, which was yes.
But it was a trick question.
It was a trick question. It's always a good time to start investing. But if you want the slightly more extended version of that answer, it's on our Instagram page. We recorded a little video. But one thing I realised quite quickly after recording that was, okay, great, now's a good time to start investing, but then what and how? And you and I, Mel, talked quite a bit about using Robo-Advisors, but actually, really interestingly, we just had a conversation with our friend Amelia about things to do with best intentions. She's a bit of a foodie herself, and we're hopefully going to get her a bit more involved in some of this stuff, and said, we're going to go and talk about Robo-Advisors now. And she said, what? What is a Robo-Advisor? And that is a bloody good question. So why don't we start there? Mel, do you have any thoughts what a Robo-Advisor is? Sounds a bit intimidating, really.
Oh, I know, it's not the best name. It's a very confusing name. I think firstly, there's a lot of people who haven't heard of it, and if you're one of those people, don't worry. So if your face is going, oh, I don't really know what this is either, that's totally fine. The secondly is, if you start engaging with the topic of Robo-Advisors, you kind of conjure up these images of there's some Terminator sat behind a computer who's going to do stuff with your money, and that's not true either. So it is very confusing. What a Robo-Advisor actually is, and we'll forget about the kind of mechanism, is a way for you to invest pretty easily, pretty cheaply, without too much knowledge, and you can do it with not very much money. So that's kind of what they're there for. It's the reason that they exist. When we talk about the ways to invest, Tara's kind of got, there's three main ways, right, in which we can invest.
Yeah, and I think some actually exclude themselves, but the three main ways you can do it is, one, do it yourself, and that we would only really suggest for people who really understand what they're doing, understand funds and how markets work and how things need to be combined to best manage risk and so on. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, so don't worry if you don't understand it, you don't need to do that. The other route, which is potentially a little bit more well known, is a financial advisor. And that is an individual person who is qualified to give you advice on not just your investment strategy, but also your whole kind of personal finance situation. That they do financial planning, they can help you think about your tax situation and all of that sort of thing. But they are really expensive. They're getting a huge amount of heat at the moment from the press about whether or not they're actually worth the money that they're charging. And I think in some cases they do bring a lot of value if you've got a really complicated either tax situation, or you're doing something like retiring, or God forbid, divorcing or anything like that, they probably do have a really, really good purpose. But for most people, you don't really need all of that additional stuff. You just need a mechanism in which to start investing. And that's where these robo-advisors come in. And I will try and have a think about something that we can call them that's a little bit less scary sounding. But they are a really amazing tool for people to get started with investing, as you said, Mel, that's cheap, but also doesn't require you to have £50,000 saved, which is often what financial advisors need people to have before they'll even look at them. Some even more than that. So
yeah, no, exactly. And that's really why robo-advisors exist. There's something called the advice gap, particularly in the UK, where there are people who have money to invest, but they can't afford a financial advisor. So what do you do when you don't have access to that kind of expert advice? And just like, we use technology now to go from A to B when it comes to Google Maps, we now use technology to be able to invest funds without needing a person there to do it for you, hence why it kind of got called the robo-advisor. So if you are starting to think about investing, this is kind of that easy way to dip your toe in, without having to do hours and hours of really complicated research of figuring out exactly where to invest, how much to invest, having to check on it every single day. Like, all of those things kind of disappear when it comes to investing in a robo-advisor.
You said dip your toe in. A lot of people, and I kind of alluded to the fact that financial advisors need you to have a big lump sum, but is there a minimum amount that people would need to get started with a robo-advisor? How small can the dip of your toe be?
It can be pretty small, so it can actually be £1. So some companies, it's a bit more than that. We're actually going to do a blog after this, which will link to a site which kind of lists out all of the robo-advisors and what the minimum investment is. But it really is, you can literally transfer £1 and you are officially investing for yourself, an investor. And it's a really kind of good way of kind of starting to understand the mechanism of investing without saving up loads of money, and say transferring £5,000, and then you go, oh no, have I done the right thing, and being really emotionally distraught about it.
Yeah, well that was important, because that's one of the things that I said when thinking about, is now a good time to start investing? Yes, but we would never ever suggest that you put all of your savings into the market all in one go on one day. It could be that you've timed it perfectly, and that so at the moment with markets having sold off quite a bit, you could time it perfectly and get the full recovery, but actually that's really unlikely. Even the best investors really struggle with that. So being able to put a small amount in and then keep adding to that over time is really valuable, and I think it's a great solution that these robo-advisors provide. The other thing which I saw, and some of them do this and some of them don't, but that awesome thing that Monzo does, where is it Monzo? Yeah, it is, where you spend money and then they do the roundups.
Yeah.
So if you spend £3.75, they'll take £4 out and put 25p in a savings account. Some robo-advisors will do that and put your money in investments, so you won't even notice really the money going out, and it will build up slowly over time, which I think is really good.
Yeah, exactly. And you can set up direct debits, and they can be really small. Find the mechanism that kind of works for you. But really, it's you can do this with a small amount of money and not a huge amount of knowledge. So it takes away a lot of those barriers that you might have had kind of beforehand.
Okay, well, why don't you talk about how? Because I think it's just the next. We always seem to be the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, we should start investing. Oh yeah, we should use robo-advisors. But I've time and time again, I realised that it really is. So how do you actually do it? What does it mean? Where do you find them? All of that. Like, please, can you tell me a bit about that?
Okay, firstly, so how do you find one? So you can literally go onto Google and put in a list of robo-advisors, and there are lots of comparison tables. As I said, we will link to them. That will show you what your options are out there. Things to look out for are what the minimum investment is, because some of them might be £1, some of them might be £10,000. So make sure you figure out, which category you fit into there. Secondly is how much they charge. Most robo-advisors will charge between probably 0.5 and 0.75% a year on your investment. So if it's £100 that you're investing and it's a 0.5% charge, you will pay 50p that year for that money to be managed. When, like Tara was talking earlier about financial advisors, those costs can be significantly higher. We're talking 3% upwards with lots of additional fees. So this really is a really low cost way to invest. Yeah. So that's two things to look out for. Third thing is when you get started, and by I've started, I mean when you go onto the website, you've chosen a robo-advisor, you know how much you're going to invest, you'll start to open an account. And there are kind of two different parts to creating an account. One is, you know, putting in your name, your address, your driving license. They'll verify who you are. And the second is...
That's the easy stuff.
You hopefully know that, like your date of birth.
I think I've got that.
And that's a good thing, actually. Before you get started, make sure you know your bank account details, got your national insurance number, all of that stuff there, so that you then don't get distracted and then don't end up doing it. So that's kind of half of it. The other half is them trying to understand your financial situation and also the way that you think about risk. I'm going to start with the first bit first. So understanding financial situation. So they will ask questions like, do you have an emergency fund? Which is something that we've spoken about before. It's really important to have your emergency fund in place before you start investing. And the second part of that is making sure that you have enough of an income to be able to support the amount that you're going to invest. So they'll have these questions. There might be one about bad debt, which is something that we spoke about last week, which is, do you have any credit cards or things like that? And what they'll do is use a calculation to work out how much money, disposable income you have on a monthly basis, and therefore whether investing is right for you.
And I think the important sort of takeaway from that, or really what's going on behind the scenes, is trying to make sure that you can have that money invested for a long enough time period. You're not going to need that money in 6 months or a year, because these decisions should be taken for at least 3 to 5 years. You don't want, it's not a get rich quick scheme. These are long-term investment decisions, and I think those questions are probably trying to help them realize whether you have the capacity to tie that money up for a longer period of time.
Yes, exactly. And we've got some top tips on the Insta of how to know whether kind of investing is right for you. Once you've done past that bit, assuming that those questions are all fine, then they'll start to ask questions about your risk. Now, risk is a really kind of abstract terminology thing used by the finance industry that me and you kind of sit there and go, you know, what's my risk number? You know, that's really hard to kind of understand. So what they'll do is ask you about how you feel about your money being in different scenarios. Now, this is the bit where a lot of people might get to and go, I don't really understand the question. They might show you some graphs. It might look a bit confusing and you go, oh, actually, maybe it's not right for me. This is the point that I want to make sure that doesn't happen. So what they'll show you is things like, if your portfolio, which is your money invested, drops by 20%, is that going to make you feel really worried? Is it going to make you feel like you need to take that money out, and therefore that kind of calibrates your level of risk? So exactly what Tara was saying, you know, this is about not needing to take that money out until it's the right time for you, because we just don't know when those market drops are going to happen. And if you're saving for something that you will definitely need that money in 2 years' time, and just at the time that you need it, that market drops, you've put yourself in a scenario where you might end up losing more money because you're forced to sell your investments. And that's kind of what this whole process is kind of educating and trying to understand around the emotional need, but also how that relates to your financial situation.
So on the point of risk, it's tricky, right? Because I don't feel very good about the prospect of losing money, whether that's online loss of money or actual physical loss of money. So, but for someone my age, presumably you would think that I should be investing for a long period of time and therefore probably have quite a high I have a high capacity to take risk, because if the market goes up and down along the way, then it doesn't really matter, because I should be investing that for a really long period of time. What would you say to people about that when they're sort of thinking about their risk? Yes, everyone doesn't want to lose money, but maybe having a higher appetite for risk could be beneficial.
Yes, so it's all this kind of like balance, right? So the more risk you take, and by risk we'll go into kind of what that actually means in terms of the investment vehicle, but the more risk that you take, the more likely you are to have higher returns. So that's more money back from your investment. The lower the risk, the less likely you are to get that. So this is where the relationship between risk and reward is related to what's going on outside externally in the markets as well, and you trying to figure out where that level is that you feel comfortable. So we are around 30. If this money is, for example, for our futures and we're not going to touch it for 20 years, we can feel pretty comfortable that actually that we can take high risk, because if we have a high risk portfolio and in 5 years time the market crashes and we lose 50%, the chances are we're still going to get back up to making more money by the time we need to take the money out.
Yeah, and I think bearing that in mind when you're being asked those questions is really, really important, because if you just say, as you may feel is the gut instinct answer to that question, oh, I don't want to lose money, I feel bad about losing money, I therefore have a low risk appetite, you could be losing out on future returns down the line. And yeah, really having a think about that balance of risk reward, as you say, Mel. Some people, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily the right thing to do, but some people do game it a little bit, where they say, right, I know that I'm going to be doing this for a long time, I know therefore that I should be taking more risk, and they kind of answer the questions with that in mind, but obviously answer them how you feel is appropriate, but just bearing that balance in mind is important.
Yeah, and another thing to remember is you haven't lost the money. If you're looking at your account and it's invested and it says you dropped 20%, that's not lost money. It's lost money as soon as you take that money out of the markets. So I do my best, although I don't have the strongest willpower in the world, to not look at my Robo-Advisor portfolio that regularly, because I know I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to change how much money I'm investing in it. I'm not going to change my risk level. I have set that based on my financial situation, and unless that changes, it doesn't really matter what that number looks like. So that's kind of a good way to think about the Robo-Advisors as well, is it's kind of, you can almost do it as set and forget, because they're looking after those portfolios for you.
Right, so we've found it on the website. We found it on the internet. We've gone to the website. We've put in our details, answered some questions. Then they send you to a portfolio and say, this is what you should be investing in.
Yes.
Then kind of what happens there, and where does the money go? What are the sort of details about that, or is that too much? I don't know.
No, that's fine. So yeah, you've answered the questions. Then you will get given a risk level, and it will say, okay, based on those answers, you're a 7 out of 10, and they will put you into a portfolio that matches that risk level. Then they're going to show you the portfolio. This is another kind of bit where if you're not a seasoned investor and you haven't done this before, it can feel a bit overwhelming, because it might be that they show you a graph saying it's 70% invested in equities and 20% invested in bonds and 10% cash, and you go, and they're like, is this the right portfolio for you? And you go, I've got absolutely no idea. They know what they're doing. They've built a business around this. The makeup of that portfolio is related to the answers to your questions and what you're trying to achieve. So don't worry if you look at it and go, do I need to be able to understand this so much that I know exactly it's the right portfolio? This is an advisor who's created this portfolio so that you can go, yes, that makes sense with what I'm aiming for. So don't let that kind of freak you out. It might also come as a list of things called ETFs, which we haven't kind of gone into yet, but it might be worth us doing now. And that's the vehicle by which your money is invested in the market. So do you want to do a brief overview of an ETF, Tara?
I think so. It's a bit of a weird, horrible acronym, isn't it? The other thing that I was thinking might be worth touching on is bonds and equities and what that kind of means, because people refer to different assets with different names, and actually something that is what most people refer to as stocks and shares can also be referred to as equity, and they're all the same thing. So it's investing in companies, and that will be a very broad mix of lots of different types of companies. It could be the biggest companies in the UK, the biggest companies in the US, it could be a blend of the two, it could be across the world, and so on. But if you see anything that has equity in it, or anything that has stocks or shares, then it's all the concept of owning parts of those companies, and very, very, very small little slivers of them with lots of other people as well. The bond is also an interesting one. A lot of people will associate bonds with premium bonds, and it's not that at all. It's lending money. A bond is effectively a loan, and that will typically in these types of portfolios be a loan to a government. So you'll be buying government bonds, which is a loan to UK government bonds, will be a loan to the UK government, and in exchange for that you'll be paid an interest every quarter or every month or every year, however frequent it is, and then at the end of that bond term you'll get the money back. So that all happens inside the vehicle. You don't really have to worry about that. Again, it will be a broad mix of bonds, loans to UK government, US government, European, maybe broader than that. So yeah, anything with bond in it is that type of investment. You may also see property pop up. I think everyone's pretty familiar with that, so that might feel a little bit more comfortable. But those are the mechanisms by which you are investing. That then gets wrapped up into anything that comes under the name of fund, and you get different types of funds. One of them is an ETF, an exchange traded fund. You just don't need to know what's going on there. It's just a way in which your money gets put into those markets, full stop. If you want to know, there's loads online. If you want to spend your time understanding what's going on in an exchange traded fund, then great, but I don't think it's worth talking about on this because you don't need to know.
Nice. That's good.
That's my thoughts.
The better.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what, they just don't make it easy, do they? Robo-Advisors and ETFs, it just sounds a bit like, why would you want to do that? It's very sci-fi.
No, I know. It's more about, okay, this is not going to be a catchy way of saying it, but making your money work hard for you so you can do the things that you want to do in the future is basically why they exist. It's for you to be able to do that.
And they have to, unfortunately, because of regulation, they have to give you all of this quite technical speak explanation of stuff, because the regulators said, oh, well, you've got to be really honest and open with consumers when they're going down an investment route. But then it just makes it really complicated for the people who are doing it and a bit more overwhelming. So it's a really tough balance of them needing to be honest and open, and making sure you're going into it with your eyes open and not overwhelming you with more information than you need to make the decision that you have to make. So a bit like we were talking about cooking earlier, but a bit like that, right? You can make a curry with 3 different ingredients and a couple of spices, or you can make a curry with loads and loads and loads of different ingredients and different spices that you can only source from some small village in India, and all of this like really technical information about how you make the paste and everything else, and it comes together to an end product that you're going to eat. But you probably didn't need to know about all of the the sourcing of all of the ingredients and that level of detail to enjoy the curry as an end result.
And we'll see if we can get the curry equivalent recipe of a Robo-Advisor for you guys next week.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, so back to Robo-Advisors. So we're on the page. This information's all come up. I think the other one thing to mention is, all of these vehicles, all these complicated words. The idea of this kind of portfolio setup is to not have all of your eggs in one basket. That's why it looks confusing. That's why there's lots of different bits and pieces. It's because you don't want to put all of your money in one place and then that one company fails and you lose all of your money. So lots and lots of diversification, which we've got in our dictionary jargon buster, which we'll go from take a look at that and see the slightly more fun answer to that question.
Yeah. Maybe slightly less true answer.
Yeah.
But you know what? Diversity and dancing, I think we could probably all do a bit more dancing and be a bit happier in our lives.
Yeah. Okay, so then it'll say, okay, you're happy with your portfolio. Hopefully you feel comfortable to go, yes, I'm happy with that. Then you will transfer your money. So they'll give you bank details to transfer it to, and they'll probably give you a reference code as well. So make sure that you get that correct, because that means that they can match the money to your account. It usually takes, I think, between 3 to 5 days, might be much quicker than that, to land, and then you'll see that in your investment portfolio. Most of them, I think all of them, probably have apps so that you can really easily log into that and see it on your phone. It's always,
but don't do it.
Yeah, it's always nice to make sure the money's gone in there, check that, and then leave it. And then that's where you are. Do that first, do it with a small amount of money, check that you're happy with it, check you're comfortable. We really do, when we talk about investing, it's a journey. This is not about getting all of your knowledge together, doing one thing and then you're done. This is a learning curve for everybody, and it continues for years and years and years. So get to a place that you're comfortable with. Hopefully you're in a place where that's something that you can add to regularly and see it grow. And it is a good tool, if you have put quite a small amount of money in there, to see how the markets kind of go up and down, because you can kind of have a look and say, okay, well, it's dropped 5%, but I might have lost 25p or something, whatever it is. So again, it's, if you've got a really small amount of money in there and you just kind of want to understand how it works, that's another kind of good tool to kind of see how things kind of ebb and flow depending on what's going on in the markets as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I sort of joke about setting and forgetting completely, but you won't forget. And if you do use this as an education tool and you do want to understand how you can get more comfortable with it, then it's really powerful and it's super easy. And as we said, you can do it with a really small amount of money. So the emotional impact when you do lose a bit of money will hopefully be slightly easier to swallow. I know that even understanding investments, even understanding what's going on in the market, which I kind of hope that I sort of do, at least I probably should, given that I work in the industry, I still find it really difficult when you see that your money has dropped in value. But I know that I've put in an affordable amount, and I know I've done it in a way that is minimizing the risk as much as possible. And so having that in the back of my mind definitely helps.
Good. Excellent.
Okay, all right. So I think because I definitely haven't really got that much experience using Robo-Advisors. I've done everything through a DIY platform, which is probably making my life a lot harder than it needs to, because I don't have very much time to do life admin, as we have learnt before. My cat does, on the other hand. But okay, so actually quite an easy setup process once you've got the answers to the questions and you understand what the questions are really trying to get at. If you can get yourself over the hurdle of seeing a portfolio and not necessarily understanding all the ins and outs of it, but knowing that those questions, the answers to those questions, have informed that, and then transfer the money in and then see where it goes.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty straightforward.
Yes, great, you've done it. And now I'm going to see your portfolio when you set it up.
Now I actually have to do it. Yeah, I mean, there's some that spring to mind. I know you said you were going to link afterwards, but I think everyone who works in the city in London will have seen Nutmeg advertised on the tube, probably. So they are a robo-advisor, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
And
there's probably, I mean, you will have seen Nutmeg on the tube, you'll probably see Money Farm on the tube, Wealthify, who I think are the ones that you can invest from £1. And then the other one that Tara mentioned at the start of the session, which is Moneybox, and that's a roundup. So that's the, you know, extra money out of your coffee being moved into your investment account, which is kind of, again, a really good way to get started without kind of needing to overcomplicate it too much.
Yeah. As a slight aside, it doesn't really affect anything, but one of the things that I found quite difficult about Nutmeg, and I think Money Farm, it just in the way that they were advertising it, I think they've changed it now, but it was very cartoony, almost quite childish, and quite kind of naively gamified. And I think that that was probably a bit unfortunate, because this is serious, this is people's money, and treating it like a sort of childish game is probably not that helpful. So I suppose don't get put off by the way in which they've chosen to advertise. I think some have potentially gone the other way as well, which is gone a bit too technical and a bit looking like a little bit too investy. So yeah, I think that was just a bit of a personal pain point. Yeah,
on the way. You know, it is difficult, and I think it's one of those things that online investing, as we've kind of spoken about it today, is not something that is hugely widely used yet. You know, it's still relatively new. Robo-Advisors have only really been around for kind of 5 or 6 years. So there is, you know, lots of people trying to figure out the best way to communicate this with customers. And as Tara said, there's a balance between it being very, very simple versus not being kind of regulatory approved. So this, you know, where we kind of stand in this is to try and help you not get stuck at any part during that process if it's something that is right for you, and to know that, you know, where it's all coming from is literally this point of, you know, getting rid of those barriers so that you, with, you know, the amount of money that you have, are able to get that into the stock market, and therefore be able to benefit from that in the future.
Yeah. Well, I will report back on my experiences with it, and also to all of you listening / watching out there, if you can tell us, even if it's that it worked and it was fine and you're happy, just feedback and let us know what your experiences are, because we want to be able to help, but also you know, the more we know about what the challenges are, what you're finding difficult and what you're finding easy and straightforward, the better that will be. Yeah. You might even be able to talk to some of them. Mel, I hear you know a robo-advisor.
Yeah, full disclosure, I work for a robo-advisor, which I haven't mentioned, as I'm trying to be very independent in this scenario. But you know, it's really helpful to know if there are bits that you get stuck in as well. You know, it's very different, you know, from my perspective, where I know kind of the ins and outs to go through that onboarding process. But if you're kind of looking at it and you're going, actually got stuck on this bit and this is where I felt uncomfortable, let us know and we can kind of look into those questions as well.
Awesome. Great, well, that was a good chat. And as always, yeah, questions, fire them over, and check us out on Instagram if that wasn't where you found us from, and get in touch. We love to chat.
We do.
We'll see you all next week.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Bye.